Over the weekend, military veterans ascended to the capital in blazers and berets, well-shined shoes, crisply creased trousers as well, to commemorate and remember old comrades, despite services being marred by protests, with 126 arrests being made, according to the Metropolitan Police. The service itself was a success, with almost 10,000 veterans and 800 armed forces personnel from all three services taking part in a march past, and the 2-minute silence was held across the UK. Joining me now to discuss the occasion and what went on there is Major General Chapman and co-founder of the Together Declaration, Alan Miller, who was at the Remembrance Parade on Saturday. Very warm welcome to both of you. And Alan, let me start with you, because I wanted to talk to you tonight because I watched with some incredulity what happened to you on Saturday afternoon after the parade itself, when you ended up in a pub in Vauxhall, which basically ended up with you being told, one, you couldn't leave the place, and two, if you did leave, you were going to have to be searched. Let's have a quick look at what happened to you.
Sorry, officer. Did I hear you right, saying that you're searching people that are coming out the pub?
I've been searched twice now.
What for? What are people being searched for exactly? Sorry, Sergeant, do you know what people are being searched for? On what ground? Okay. So I'm coming to a pub to go to the toilet to have a coffee, and now we've not only been locked in the pub, we're being told that we're going to be searched on the way out. By the way, look at actually what's still going on, and lots of people have not been searched or stopped for lots of things.
I mean, you can see a very large crowd outside, and that's just the police. There's an even bigger crowd behind them. But tell us how that all kind of played out, Alan, and how it happened like that.
Well, the thing is, Mike, it was like something from a Kafkaesque novel from Kafka, because I'd been at the Cenotaph and been outside Winston Churchill's statue. It had been very dignified. I had left. And then I thought I wanted to go and see what people were saying. I wanted to see the composition, what people were saying. I know some people who'd been on some of the Palestine demonstrations. I wanted to talk to some people, get a read and feel of what was really going on. And I'd begun to do that, and I was walking along. I saw some things that were very unpleasant, but I also met some people that were, decent enough. And I've been opposed to banning marches and demonstrations and speech. I'm still opposed to it. I agree with Peter, actually, that I think we need the light of reason and democracy and freedom to illuminate things. And what I'm really concerned about is what then happened. This is the problem, because like with Extinction Rebellion and other things, we've already had the laws that exist to stop illegal acts and behaviour, but there hasn't been a commitment by the police to do that, and of the authorities. And instead, we've had more laws passed, the Police and Crime Sentencing Act, the Online Safety Bill, to have ever more regulations that then limit many of us, all of us, about what we can do and say, and still the other things continue, right? Because if you don't have a backbone to actually eliminate those things and deal with them, then that's the problem. So I've gone into the pub to use the toilet, to go to the bathroom and to see I'll have a coffee. And then I was told I couldn't leave. No one gave me any explanation why. And then it went on for about 3.5 hours. I did a couple of videos with some people in there. What did they think? What were they doing there? It was also quite alarming, because you could tell with all the police that had cordoned us off, they were filming us in there. And if you were actually in that demonstration, you might end up thinking there were some people in here that was somehow a problem.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, people were obviously very insulted. It demonized. There was only about 15 people in the pub, maybe 20.
Yeah, it was quiet.
A few locals. And you could see how this can really make people very indignant and feel like it's not without fear or favour policing, that it's unjustified, and it's actually discriminating against people in the wrong way. I mean, what was the suspicion? I asked several times of the governor, the police officers that was the chief inspector and the others, what are the grounds? What's the basis? What's your concerns? Could you tell me, please, on what the criteria is for doing this? Because I was asking so many questions and filming it, they actually sent 2 very charming, nice female officers to me, whereas other people, they were actually arm twisting and taking them out. I said, I will not be happy about being treated like that. Right. I've come in here. But the big concern is that we've got this ability, using both emergency laws and others, to do this. But then what my concern is that they haven't been targeting clearly people that have been doing all sorts of things, like attacking police with fireworks, calling for the death of people, a range of other things. Yeah. We've been told that it's all the far right, and I actually think, as it happens, the press and the media, some of them are partly responsible for stoking some things up and presenting it all one way. Then we see Suella Braverman sacked for saying a thing that many in the British public agree with.
Well, and also more or less saying something that ended up being played out on the streets. Let me bring in Major General Chapman. Major General, thanks for joining us. I think what Alan says is right, isn't it? There is a sort of a distance to go between the way the police act with one group and another group.
I'm not sure that that's absolutely the case on Saturday. I mean, if we probably analyse the number of people who were arrested, you'd probably find that most of those who were arrested, they might not be charged, which is a different thing, were those who invaded the Cenotaph on, you know, the sort of sovereign citizens who thought they were protecting the Cenotaph prior to 11 o'clock.
Yeah, but they didn't invade the Cenotaph, did they? They didn't invade the Cenotaph. The police tried to kettle them to try to stop them from getting there, and they, perhaps rightly or wrongly, thought it was their right to get there. They did get there, and when the 2-minute silence was on, they were silent. So, I mean, the police kind of created...
In the run-up to that, they didn't really need to be there. I mean, we don't need to really argue that one. So they were counter-protesters. That's the phrase.
Well, the Palestinians don't need to be there either, do they? It's not a question of needing to be there.
And they weren't there, and that's why I absolutely thought the march should go ahead, not because I'm a part of the free speech wing of the Free Speech Party, but if you do a military mission analysis on the thing, which generally we look at ground, time and space, they were going no closer than 1 mile to the Cenotaph, and they were separated by 2 hours. So the notion that the two things collided on Armistice Day, which is essentially about a 2-minute silence, not the national celebration, which was going to take place on Remembrance Sunday, that's when the 10,000 people were going to be marching, organised by the RBL. So just in terms of those things, there was no absolute need to ban the march. Neither was there any intelligence that this march had enough gravity and scale for it to be a large demonstration which would kick off into tens of thousands of people being arrested. And I think you quoted, Mike, the figure earlier on of the 128 being arrested at the weekend. That is not something when you have 300,000 people there, which meets the remit under Section 13 of the Public Order Act 1988 to be prohibited.
No, I get that. But I mean, the question I would have is that an awful lot of people that I've been in touch with since the weekend, service people particularly, have said that the whole weekend was kind of ruined because of the fact that all of this extra noise was going on, partly because of the fact that the march did not cancel itself, which everyone had asked them to do, and people would have preferred it if they had done. And my question, I suppose, to you, before I go back to Alan, is you know, how much more of this are we supposed to put up with? You know, how many more times every single weekend are we going to be unable to go into central London for fear of the fact that you might either get cracked around the head by some group or other who are not doing what they're supposed to do, or you're going to be in a local fast food restaurant and people are going to come in and start haranguing you and telling you shouldn't be buying your stuff there. You know, kind of things that are impossible to perhaps arrest people for at the time, but which make it very unpleasant for ordinary Londoners and ordinary tourists to go about their business.
Yeah, well, the first point is that what's unusual at the moment is most of the campaigns in the Middle East that the Israelis are involved in only go on for a short period of time. The most recent in 2014, 2021, lasted 18 days, and flare-ups in terms of both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are generally, you know, run in parallel with those things. Now, the war is going on, and these flare-ups will continue. I think that will play into the continuance of marches on both sides. So, for example, today we learned, because under Section 11 of the Public Order Act, you have to actually give advance notice. So we know, for example, that today there is going to be a march on Sunday the 26th against anti-Semitism. Now, most of us would say that is a good thing, in the same way that it is a good thing that most people should be exposing extremism. So these marches will go on. They will only be prohibited, as I sort of suggested, if it meets a scale where we think there's going to be massive disorder, because it's the role of the Met to facilitate peaceful protest and prevent serious disorder, disruption and damage. That is what their role is, operationally independent. And if they don't think that's going to happen because the intelligence suggests otherwise, then they can go to the Home Secretary to apply for it to be prohibited.
OK. Alan, let me come back to you. So how did it all end in your case? Did you get out eventually? Did you have to be searched? Did you have to submit to it?
Yeah, well, whether I had to or not, some people are saying you could refuse it. I think that would have represented an arrest. I didn't fancy being arrested. I had nothing actually to hide. I very much I disagreed with it. I made it clear to everyone, and obviously it's been posted, it's been shared everywhere. I want to say just a couple of things. I think that much of this discussion, and I think, the previous comments are right, that they were in two different places at two different times. But over the last few weeks, some people believe and have seen an unwillingness on behalf of the Met Police, and they say it might be to do with resources and other things, to intervene around certain things. There is a concern that some people will be called racist if they do certain things, right? We've seen that happen again. In a way, it's very different than if you post something on social media about trans, for instance. You see 6 police officers turning up at your house. Now, we're seeing some of these things. We're also seeing some of the media stoke these things up. It's almost like you get a whole layup with what's happened with Suella Braverman as well. I think there are some real concerns. Now, I'm not opposed to protests or speech. I think they're really important. I think we should, because what ends up happening is you get more of what happened to me and other people if you increase stifling limits, and we've had a lot more of those restrictions. But you have to have the willingness, leadership, and the ability to execute around things that are tough and tricky. And obviously the police have been put in a difficult position. The Hendon Training School and their messaging from Sadiq Khan and others has often been presenting things in a certain way and ideologically. They should be policing without fear or favour. I agree that there's a limit. It's not that everyone goes on the protest and they're all of the same thing, but we have seen a distinct change, I think, this weekend, where people dressed a certain way. If you imagine our terrorist attacks where brave citizens intervened at London Bridge a few years ago, the idea that would be associated in any way with a liberation movement or sovereignty, it wasn't. People said,
no, it's not.
You're nihilist.
You're absolutely right. Listen, I've got to stop you there. Sorry, but I'm just out of time. But you're absolutely right. We can't have people impersonating terrorists walking around Hyde Park, wherever it is, without fear or favour. It just can't be done. But thank you to both of you, Major General Chip Chapman, Alan Miller from the Together Declaration as well. This is going to be something we're going to be talking about for a long time.